Before we begin, two messages. What mobile platform do companies like eBay, NBC Universal, the Los Angeles Times, Razorfish, and PayPal use to build their cross-platform native applications? Titanium by Appcelerator. They aren't alone. There are now over 25,000 apps deployed by Appcelerator, which has been called the Rosetta Stone of app development. And you can start now for free. Just go to www.appcelerator.com for more information. When my company needed to develop a key mobile product, one that I was counting on as a new source of revenue, I knew exactly who to turn to. Macadamian. They delivered on time with incredible attention to detail, and I was able to get product into customers' hands faster than I ever thought possible. I've personally known them for 10 years, and they do make great products even better. Check them out at www.macadamian.com. Hello everybody and welcome. This is Untether.tv and I'm your host and founder, Rob Woodbridge. This is where we bring together these great minds, these entrepreneurs that are paving the way, that are building the next generation of companies as we're building this mobile world. We're trying to figure it all out. It's very difficult to balance those two, and especially when you throw in this changing industry around television. Man, I love television. I think everybody does. But boy, do I ever want it on my time. And there have been these instances, I'll tell you, I'll explain the situation, where you are sitting there watching a television show. Sometimes for me, it's like, have I seen this one before? What's it about? Who's the host? A little bit more back information. But the distance between my television set and my couch, maybe it's 6 feet. But there's such a deep hole that I cannot interact with my TV. And there are people looking to solve these problems. And one of them is a company called Umami, based out of New York City, and I've got Scott Rosenberg, who's the co-founder and CEO, to help us fix this problem. Right, Scott? That's what you're doing.
That's what we're doing. Well, so I haven't heard it described as a chasm between your couch and your TV, but I might use that in the future. I like it.
It's pretty big, you know, because people have been promising interactive television and two-way communication with your TV since, you know, the first ColecoVision was out there, right? And all of a sudden,
you're dating yourself.
Yeah, I know. Well, I'm an old guy. But all of a sudden, with these devices in our hand, there really is now, like a light went on, there really is an opportunity here, isn't there? And that's where Umami sits. Why don't you talk about what Umami is to begin with?
Sure. You know, not unlike you've just said, well, I guess a little bit about us, the founders of the company and the company more generally. We've been working in the interactive TV space for 15 years, and folks have been talking about the opportunities you've just rattled off there for just as long, and unfortunately, you know, the industry as a whole has really not delivered on that. The opportunity to get some piece of juicy gossip on that actress, or buy the product you've just seen on screen, or get the music that you've just heard. There's no shortage of consumers who will say they want those things. So we've felt very strongly that although in the venture community, interactive television, that term is something, carries some scorched earth with it. We felt that the demand function, the consumer side interest in those activities was really robust, but rather it was the plumbing between the content owner and the consumer that's gotten in the way. So we looked at the advent of devices like web-connected smartphones and tablets and said, hey, this affords a brand new way to deliver on that promise without all of the technology and economic gunk in between. All the things that you have to do, for example, if you want to cause that interactivity to happen through your remote, through your cable set-top box. So we set about building a platform that would basically allow what happens on that second screen to be closely synchronized with what's on the first screen, and bring to the consumer great content related to what they're watching across all their favorite shows. But importantly, too, we also said, you know, this really doesn't work for the consumer, it doesn't work economically unless the folks who own that content, and who, by the way, have access to great ancillary content, access to the talent, access to great marketing platforms. This whole opportunity doesn't really work unless you're also working with Discovery, a Nat Geo, and NBC, and helping them create those experiences. So we basically set about building a platform that brings a great companion TV experience to the consumer, but is backed up with a publishing platform that our content partners can use to help author and augment the experiences we bring. So it's a free iPad app, and it's in the App Store as of a couple of weeks ago. Here we are.
And you launched with 40 channels that are building auxiliary content on your platform.
Well, so the app will sync to 40 networks. This is it's national programming on all the broadcast nets and all the top cable networks. See, in the Canadian market, I'm a little fuzzier on sort of how programming gets through all the different affiliates, but pretty much everything that that dominates viewership today in the U.S. is part of our inset, and that we sync to and provide you content across those 40 networks doesn't necessarily mean that we're partnered with all those networks. We have a few partnerships and many more underway. And this is an important part of our strategy. We felt that there was a good opportunity to bring content and conversation to the consumer across a broad swath of programming, but that as we partnered up with more and more networks, we could get out of the way effectively and allow them to drive the experience. Does that answer your question?
It does. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because why now? I mean, it seems like a simple question, but there have been people that have been approaching this for 15 years, like for longer than that, since we realized that we spend 5 or 7 or 12 hours a day watching this television, this idiot box, as my father would always call it, in our living room. Like, we center our lives around this thing. We schedule times where we have to be in front of the TV or we miss the show. At least it used to be that way. Right. So they've been trying to do this for a long time. Is it just that all of a sudden, because of the proliferation of these devices, these lean-back devices or smartphones, that all of a sudden people are looking at it differently? Because you've been tackling it the same way, like Google plugging in a box and Apple plugging in a box and to make it interactive. But was it really the devices that changed the thinking?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's a confluence of inflection points really that are occurring. One is, as you say, is these devices are available. They're distributed in critical mass. They're very powerful. They have the computational capability to do the fingerprinting that we do to drive that synchronization, but they're web connected. They're fast. They're fun to use. They're always on you. I think that's a really key inflection point. I think some other important inflection points are the television industry is maturing. And so, 10 years ago, TV networks were struggling with the notion of coming online. Mm-hmm. We weren't even talking about broadband video at that point. We were just talking about, like, do I have a website and how, what's on it? And how
can I get my TV listings up there? That's what it was. Yeah.
But how critical is it to my strategy? I mean, we're 10 years past that. Every network has very serious investments, not just in their online properties, but now has most networks have very sophisticated strategies for how they syndicate content out. So, the thought process among big media owners is really quite evolved. There's a whole new generation of executives that are leading these companies and thinking about devices and distribution channels and interactivity in different ways than they were 10 years ago. There are definitely aspects of this business that still have a lot of evolution to occur. Folks in Hollywood writing shows and producing them aren't really yet thinking most folks are still thinking about sort of the linear TV consumption experience. There's a crop of new folks who are starting to think about sort of highly nonlinear and multi-screen or what some folks would call transmedia experiences. But they're still a rarity, and so that's a whole yet additional evolution that's going to occur in the business as folks, at writing, at production time, are thinking, all right, some critical percentage of my viewers are going to have 2 screens open, and so I need to, like, at writing and production time, think about what am I doing on this screen, what in conjunction with that screen. Today, a lot of what's happening, that's part of sort of this bridging to that future world of TV. A lot of what's happening is people are saying, well, I got great ancillary assets. I got my phone here in my hand. I guess it's off view. What's happening with today in our business and in multi-screen televisions, people are saying, well, I've got great assets, but maybe I'm not getting great use out of them, or I have some spot interactivity I want to do. And so let's start there. And then, maybe for select shows, I'll start to produce, I'll start to experiment with 2-screen production techniques. I'm trying to think of some other inflection points. Broadband connectivity is a really big deal,
huge,
of course.
Huge. Yeah.
And just training consumers to think about more than one screen. I mean, all of us now are thinking, well, gosh, I missed Walking Dead, and I didn't record it on my DVR, but I can go find it on iTunes, you know. Or I didn't watch Big Bang Theory, but I can go to the network site and get it. So I just think consumer mindset is evolving as well.
So I mean, the big question. I got a lot of big questions here, but I think the big question that I'm asking is why? Like, what's so important? I mean, people clamor to DVDs, for example, as portable media. They had the movies, and then they had the 19 hours of extras and cutscenes and alternative endings. But why is this so important to TV? Or is it important to TV? I think it is, but
yeah, I mean, in some sense, interactivity is really just about extending what TV folks already do today. You know, television is all about recruiting viewers into your viewership, keeping them there, keeping them engaged, so that when an ad break occurs, their attention is focused and they absorb messaging from whoever is actually paying for the programming. And in the case of subscription networks, the arithmetic's a little bit different, but it's sort of the same thing. So television's about more deeply engaging viewers, and especially as viewers evolve their viewing habits and they start watching in a time-shifted manner, they start having more and more distractions at their disposal. Viewership sort of flattens out and spreads out, longer and longer tails. It becomes even more critical for TV folks to think about new techniques for continuing to do what they need to do, which is recruit people into their audience, keep them there, keep them engaged, be able to go to an advertiser and say, hey, with my brand, with my audience, folks are X% more aware of your brand, or more likely to take action on it. So we view what we do as really a natural extension of what the TV business already has to do.
Do you see this having? I mean, if you kind of project a little bit in the future, and not too far, but do you think that this has an impact on the? You said it before, the way the writers write the shows and the way that the shows are produced, television shows are produced in general. But do you see this having an impact where they've, everything's a 30-minute episode, and then if you wanted more, it's burstable through these devices where you can get alternative endings, you can get cutscenes. Like, I think of a show like The Amazing Race, right? They did a great job of kind of broadcasting an hour, and then they have 3 hours of canned stuff on their website, and it's kind of like a teaser. The TV becomes a teaser. Oh,
I think there are a lot of people betting and hoping that it doesn't, because that's where all the money's made. I think it's the other way around, right? Today, anyway.
But that's kind of putting revenue first versus kind of ultimately what's the best format for the medium, right?
Right. I agree with that. I think it's going to vary very significantly by programming type. A lot of folks like to say to us, well, what is the one thing that everybody wants to do across all demographics and all kinds of programming? And TV is a big space with a lot of strategies, a lot of types of programming, a lot of viewers, and I think it's going to vary very significantly. That heavily scripted, dramatic primetime show, we have to be just a lot more thoughtful about what's happening on a multi-screen basis, because it's an inherent part of that genre that your focus and suspense is squarely focused on the first screen. That's very different than the kind of interaction you might have with a viewer if you're watching a reality show or a contestant show, where you actually want the consumer voting actively, or grabbing conversation, participating in conversation on Twitter. So I think what we'll see is TV starts to sort of move, different genres and cohorts, consumer cohorts, start to move in fairly different directions, and the behaviors may be quite different. Certainly for a certain class of programming, we're starting to see people who are thinking about, well, I'm going to have a second screen there, so how can I take advantage of it?
That's the coolest part about this, is because I think it's been fairly prescribed up until this point. Maybe for those of you guys including people who are watching or listening to this who have been in this space for a long time, like Scott has, you start to think, okay, well, this has been a slow evolution. But for a consumer standpoint, we have been pretty much, it's been prescription, is that we're going to put this TV show on here, and it's a great slot. It's the Friends slot on Thursday, and then the show that we want to bump up is going to be right after that to get the flow through. But all of that is being disrupted right now. And so this is really the first time where you start to think about, listen, I'm not sitting in front of my television set to watch it. I could be on my computer or my smartphone, and I could be watching it at 11 o'clock or 8 p.m. or whenever I want to. And that's what's really the challenge, is that this is not a homogeneous environment anymore, right? You're not broadcasting and to the same audience. And this reality could set in here where, the advertising dollars you used to be spending on what you thought was a valuable show, you're now reaching a smaller but more targeted audience that still has value, but you're not getting the millions of viewers you once did. Like this is an upheaval for this industry, isn't it?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, even in the example you've just mentioned, so earlier in my career, I used to run an engineering team at a long since gone company called Replay TV, which was an early TiVo.
Oh, yeah, I remember those guys.
Yeah, and I think even in the conversation in the industry around the DVR, there are a lot of folks who like to say, well, it's bumped ratings, it's improved ratings, or and certainly for some kinds of shows, that's absolutely true. Or folks will say with regards to things like Twitter, like, well, all viewership is coming back to live because everybody wants to participate in the conversation. And these are sort of very monolithic arguments that look the fact that there are very different viewers, very different kinds of shows, and the behaviors are kind of teasing apart. We talk to networks that who say to us, on certain shows, 30 to 40% of their viewership is time shifting. Mm-hmm. I mean, as you said, that has a non-trivial long-term impact on the business model of TV, and I personally think it's an incredibly exciting time to be in the business, and that's going to force whole new kinds of programming strategies, whole new distribution strategies, the use of second screen devices, and for the consumer, it's a huge win because it gives us optionality of when we consume stuff. It gives us a richer experience. It might also net out that certain kinds of shows, just the economics around those shows just aren't as favorable anymore, and there's nothing that says that something that's big and popular now and well monetized now is going to be in that exact same situation 5 years from now. So I think it's a fascinating time to be in the business.
Well, so I mean, it leads into the question about certainly networks and television producers and TV show producers and writers and all of these guys who make a living doing this, and the networks who make a living selling the advertising to support the cost of the shows and the production and the licensing of the shows. They have to be looking for additional pots of revenue, right? Because they must be looking at this saying, right now we're making all of our revenue, as you said. This is where the brunt of the revenue is from the sit back experience, the broadcast experience. But they must see that shifting. So they must be looking for ways of generating revenue. And is that something that Umami can bring to them as an additional source of revenue? Or is it just, I say this lightly, but I think engagement is a source, a type of revenue. But is there monetary value, or is it just deeper engagement and commitment from the viewers that you guys bring?
Right. I think there's a lot occurring in the quotes social TV space that's maybe fits more of what you described, which is you do it because it's a marketing initiative, it's a bid for
loyalty, almost
and you hope that it kind of converts back to more viewership or retain
somehow.
I mean, certainly we think that's a very important part of what we do, and we interact with TV marketers all the time. But we also very deliberately set out to extend the TV ad model. And, we believe that if you've got a run-along companion experience on a second screen, and it's helping keep the viewer more engaged with the programming, and, that creates a very natural way to extend, for example, product integrations during the program segment itself, as well as extending the ad spots. And so a big part of our technology mix is to empower our content partners to do that. So we're certainly squarely focused on bringing new revenue in. you know, and expanding the pie, not just sort of shifting it around or
Yeah, taking from one and then bringing it, like you're looking at growing the revenue, the total revenue value of the television experience, as opposed to just taking from advertising and putting it into
Right.
you. Yeah.
Right. I mean, said another way, you know, one of the ironies today about the way the TV ad model works, actually, I'll phrase this as a question for you. So if you see an ad that's like wildly successful, you know, resonates with you, you know, whatever it is, your lifestyle, the kind of car you want, or the right kind of diaper for your kid, what do you do? What would you do today if you see an ad that really resonates with you?
Yeah, it's a good question. You know, you try to remember it. I don't write anything down. And then sometimes when I'm passing it on a shelf in a grocery store or wherever it might be, or a car dealer as I'm driving by,
right.
Yeah, I'll remember it.
Right. Okay. Or, you know, or you might also, if you have your phone and tap, you might Google it.
Sure.
Right. And you know, the irony here is, you know, what you may very well do is search for it and then click on an ad for it.
Yeah.
And the traceability of that consumer behavior, that, you know, the TV ad's done what it said it should, but the traceability of that behavior is not great. And then, of course, you know, there are other people in the value chain, Google and whatnot, who are deriving financial benefit from the effectiveness of that spot. You know, so a successful TV spot actually begets behavior on other platforms, but the folks who sold it don't always get a clear reward for that.
Right.
And so, you know, we think that that a platform like ours offers that, you know, that natural opportunity to close that loop and allow you to bookmark the ad or take an action on the spot, or
sign up for a coupon or something like that. Right. So get engaged.
Right, that's right. That's right.
Well, put your hand up and say, like, I'm interested in that product. So it's whether it's a sign-up ad or something like that that allows you to take that next step.
Right. Now, I mean, unlike, you know, some of the startups and other companies that sort of are thinking about this space, we do think you have to do work to cause the consumer to be there in the first place and be open to that messaging. Yeah. You know, all the stuff around like QR codes and whatnot, you know, those are sort of premised on this idea that you're going to see an ad, you're going to dive for your phone or your tablet, you're going to tag it, and you're going to take an action. And, you know, there's cool novelty for us tech geeks. There's great novelty in, you know, being able to, like, do something like that. But I think, you know, the steady state here for the TV business is the way TV works today is you tickle the interest with the spot, and you got to make it dirt simple for the consumer to say, yeah, I want more info, or no, I'm already ready to buy it.
Right.
Boom. But you have to have the content there. You have to have the experience there that causes the consumer to be open to that messaging in the first place.
You know, you hit on such an important point there, where people look at mobile marketing and marketing via mobile as okay, we're just going to throw up a QR code and it's done. And so you see all these ads, and it's the same thing with the television ads, right? I sit with my wife and I look at some of these ads and I think, how did that get made? You know, like, who approved that? Because if they did, they should be fired. Those are terrible ads, right? Yeah. What it did is moved me away from that product, and you've got to be very careful, especially in the mobile space, because it can create or break brands very easily. But you know, you throw up without a thought, you know, a dumb-looking QR code, and no message around it, and no call to action, and no enticement. It's still, you know, that's as important as when you convinced a user to scan it or to engage through your app, that the experience has to be something overwhelming for them, or else they're not going to get moved to do anything. Right.
Yeah, I'll confess I don't really understand the QR code space and like why it was hot and then it wasn't, and now it seems to be hot again. But
QR codes are back, baby. Yeah.
But you know, I think, you know, the basic consumer behavior and the traditional marketing funnel still applies, right?
Yeah.
You have to tickle their interest. You have to, you know, get them aware of your product. You know, and you know. Betting that just having the code there fundamentally changes your, you know, your economics is probably not a good one. I mean, we think the same thing applies in TV. You know, the ad spot is still the most powerful ad medium in terms of sight, sound, and motion,
Yeah.
and the number of people it can reach. We think there's a great opportunity to extend it in a very consumer friendly way.
So is your hope that, I mean, something that is measurable, obviously, because this is very measurable, right? So you know what show they're watching, you know when they're watching, you know when they're engaged, you know how long they're engaged, you know how long they ultimately are watching, you know what they're doing inside of there. But then is the whole goal here as well to enable this, you know, this mobile commerce, mobile transactions through this application so that, listen, I'm watching the show because I know that that eBay came out with this application that knows what you're watching and you can buy whatever's on the show.
Yeah.
Is that where you ultimately want to get, or are you fussed about that yet?
You mean about merchandising?
Yeah, about merchandising and enabling that commerce side. So not only merchandising from the show.
Yeah.
Right. But also about enabling merchandise or some kind of transactions from the advertiser. So I see the ad, as you said. I'm connected on my second screen, which I mean, I consider these things my first screen now. But I connect on my second screen, and now I want to bridge it. I want to create an action. I want to go buy whatever that they're trying to sell me, or order, or
yeah.
Are you trying to close that gap?
Yeah, yes, of course. In certain circumstances, there's that opportunity. You know, we're not gonna cause you generally to buy a car on the spot.
I got a habit, right? It's like I'm a home shopping addict.
More money than we are, but yes, you know, but it's very product specific, it's very consumer specific. But I think certainly for certain classes of products,
right,
there's an opportunity to consummate the marketing funnel right then and there, you know, and that might be because they had seen that spot 3 times and now they're finally ready, or it might be because it's such a compelling offer. I think short of actually fulfilling the transaction, which of course they're, you know, now technically that's very feasible with a platform like ours, but short of that, there's lots of rich things that can be done to move the consumer along that marketing funnel of like, all right, well, Rob wants more information. He's not ready to buy it now, but we can get his email address. We can send him some brochure. We can get him to give his phone number over to a local auto dealer. There are a lot of things, very powerful things that can be done with a platform like ours to move the consumer down that funnel.
You know, it's funny because I don't know what the average person spends. I mean, I spend a lot on apps and engagement through the mobile devices that I carry, but that's because I'm in the industry. But you know, the average person, you know, balks at kind of anything over $9.99, and I can't imagine the advertisers, you know, spending a lot of money to broadcast a message where the product is only $10. So, I mean, ultimately, you've got to match up who your audience is with the appropriate reason. So, if you're exactly as you said, is if you're trying to sell a car, the idea is then to get me engaged, so I ask for more information, right? Because I'm not going to buy a car, contrary to what I said. I don't buy cars through my mobile device, and I don't think I'd love to meet anybody out there who's done that.
Yeah, that's a little over my spousal spending limit. I don't get to.
It's absolutely true, and I don't think iTunes, my credit card is in tune for that on iTunes either. So
yeah.
So now, when you start to think about this, when you go forward here, you know. I don't believe in analysts, and anybody who talks about 2015 and what's going to happen in there is full of it, and just simply because the world has changed in the last 18 months, and nobody saw that coming. So why would you believe the same guys that are going to tell you the next 3 or 4 years? But 2012, this is going to be a year that is you know, as tumultuous as 2011. But in what you're doing, I mean, what excites you about what's coming down this road in the next year or so?
You know, I think we all have a lot to learn still about how consumer behavior is going to evolve, and those things can move deceptively fast and slow at the same time, right? I mean, smartphone adoption has it moved radically fast, you know, in terms of the speed with which people have taken those devices on. You know, now versus 3 years ago, the percentage of smartphone penetration is ridiculous. I mean, 2 years ago, nobody thought that, you know, tablets were a 10-year-old discussion, and the entire industry was cynical about their practicality. And boom, the iPad changed everything. So, you know, I think the really exciting things to look at over the next year is certainly folks like us and our partners are starting to enable powerful two-screen experiences and push the envelope on on consumer behavior and explore and understand what it is consumers are going to want to do. And I think we're going to learn a lot over the next 12, 18 months about what's really resonating and what isn't. I'm very excited about that. There are folks in the business in TV who are experimenting with fundamentally different programming models and interaction models. I think that's very exciting. Yeah. And you know, that just means TV is going to get better. You know, I think the device landscape just gets richer and richer. So you know, iPad's king right now in tablets, but Kindle Fire is on fire, and this kind of choice puts the burden back on the device manufacturers and folks who make apps like us to really innovate. Right. And I think that's the most exciting thing. Is that, you know, at the end of the day, for Umami and for everything we do, we try to think about it from our own personal behavioral perspective. And I think the ways in which we get TV and interact with TV are changing very quickly. The optionality is growing, and that's just fun. That's a lot of fun.
So how do you guys create awareness for something like this? You know, because that's ultimately you're now competing in a pool of 1 million apps, and you have to kind of rise above that. What's going to be the key for you guys, and how do you do that?
Right. Well, it's hard work. You know, I mean, there's
no, not. You just put it in the App Store, and then you sit back.
Right. Yes. Right. Lightning in a bottle.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean,
there's this game called Angry Birds that happened to, so it's got to happen to everything.
Right. Yeah. Right. It does happen. I'm not going to say it's not. Yeah. You know, I think it's part of it's about having a great product, right, and just really hitting a nerve. You know, hitting something that people really want. Part of it is about you know, associating what you do with brands that consumers have a lot of affinity and attraction for. Certainly, a big part of our strategy is to work with folks who've got great brands and have great marketing platforms. So that's a key part of what we do too.
So leveraging their audience is obviously key for you guys.
Yeah. Yes. You know, people love TV. So part of the task here is to convince them that this makes TV better. Yeah. And I think another big dimension here is, you know, the social dimension is very important. There are certain kind of staid consumer behaviors around how we like to talk about television that can be tapped into, and then there's a new set of behaviors where people are trying to, you know, figure out, you know, what does it mean to participate virtually in the conversation around TV? How does that become relevant? You know, what kind of shows is that relevant on? And how do I solve the East Coast, West Coast, you know, live DVR,
play, yeah.
Press pause while I go get a Coke, you know, all that kind of stuff. So I think there's a lot of really interesting innovation and natural social behavior to tap into around television too, and that's a key component of how we go about it. And you keep at it. I mean, you know, it's a really the app ecosystem is overflowing with apps, and you know, I think that itself is a really interesting science.
All right, last question. I know you got to go.
Yeah.
What kind of disruption lies ahead for the industry that you're in? Because my guess is that we're steamrolling towards something, and whether it's in a year or 2 or 3, is there something that you see that is, look, this is about to be disrupted?
Well, yeah, it's a great question. I mean, we think what we're doing is pretty disruptive.
Right. That's a good answer. You're the disruptor. That's fine.
We didn't set. Yes, we didn't set out to be non-disruptive. So, you know, I think the first screen interactivity on the first screen is really interesting. It's complicated in many of the ways that television's been historically complicated, because there are a lot of manufacturers in the mix. But I think there's some really interesting stuff coming down the pike there. And the stuff that'll hit first there is just new ways of streaming over-the-top video. I think that's really exciting. I think, and I'm sort of stepping outside of our focus area, which is companion TV. But I think, you know, I used to run interactive advertising in the Guide for a company called TV Guide, or what's now Rovi. We spent a lot of time thinking about what we call guidance, and you know, how do you help people find stuff they're going to enjoy watching? There's a ton of startups and really interesting technology at work on that front, and I think that's pure awesomeness from a consumer perspective, because I struggle. You know, I schedule sitting down with my wife and kids. I'm going to sit and watch an hour of TV, but my first question is, what am I going to watch? And I think there's a ton of really interesting innovation coming on that front too. So those are sort of three categories I would say: is companion experiences of the sort that we're building, stuff happening on the first screen, both in terms of interactivity and over-the-top video delivery, and then I think the third interesting dimension is on the front of guides and recommendations.
Yeah. I love that. I love that, Scott. Thank you so much. I know you got to fly, but how can people find you guys right now? More information.
Yeah, we're umami.tv, UMAMI.tv. We're in the App Store. We're on the web. You can follow us on Twitter and find us on Facebook. And we'd love to hear from you. Check out the app. Let us know what you think. It's exciting times, and we're working very hard to create a great consumer experience and create a great platform for our partners. So we'd love your feedback.
Exceptional, Scott. Thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate your time. Enlightening, because this is one of those industries, like the newspaper industry, that television, while it's still very prominent and relevant, is poised for disruption as a result of these devices that we carry, or the devices that are sitting on our laps. They used to be innocuous, and now they've become dangerous to this industry, and it's companies like yours that are going to actually extend what they're doing and the efforts that they put into it. So, I love what you guys are doing. Thanks so much for doing this.
Yeah, thank you. Nice chatting with you.
I've been speaking with Scott Rosenberg, who's the co-founder and CEO of a company called Umami. Go to umami.tv. That's UMAMI.tv. I want to thank Scott for his participation. I want to thank you guys who are still watching or listening. Really appreciate the fact that you do this every episode. It means so much to me. If you have any comments or feedback or any suggestions, reach out at untether@gmail.com, and I will respond to every last one of them. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time on untether.tv. Thanks, Scott.
Thanks. Take care.